old days, Yom Haatzmaut was much more of a contentional issue. And nowadays, and I can say, Pashto Shad is, they don't care about anything. They don't care about anything. We don't care about anything. So guys don't care about anything. There used to be guys with Hallel and all these things. We're going to speak about a few minutes about Yom Haatzmaut, speak about Hallel, and speak about what it's all about. If we limit Yom Haatzmaut to a celebration like July 4th, then it's really not such a problem. Independence Day. When you want to make it more of a religious holiday, so we have to understand why is it a religious holiday. It should be a religious holiday. And I'm not going to go through the sugi. I learned the sugi if anybody wants in Megillah, but when you say Hallel. So there's a shout of Hallel. And I'm not going to go into, I don't want to go into that detail. I mentioned that Rabbi Soloveitchik, who was the honorary president of Mizrahi, I remember him saying Tachton and Yom Haatzmaut, I live at YU. And I saw that he says that if you want to say Hallel without a bracha, it's better to say it after the Kaddish. So it shouldn't be part of the tefillah. Okay, so that's, in halach it's not so pashut at all. Halal is halal with the brachas, so you're not pashut. But I don't want to go into that at this point. I want to talk a little bit about what the whole idea is. The Zionist movement, when it started, was in other words, the way we as religious Jews look at the whole movement. Eretz Yisrael has been something, but the Zionist movement had nothing to do with Eretz Yisrael. Herzl himself was a totally assimilated Jew. I don't know how much history I want to do that, but was a totally assimilated Jew. There was a famous case in France. You know what this? Famous case in France. You know that you go to Rechavia, you see some street names. I don't know what they are. There's a street named Emile Zola in Rechavia. Why is Emile Zola? So a famous case in France where they accused the Jew of spying for the Germans. And he was tried twice, and he was put in exile twice. And there was a guy who wrote an article in a French newspaper called J'accuse, I accuse. And he accused the French government of anti-Semitism. And at the end of the story, they released him. And they realized he wasn't a spy. It was a guy who was a spy for the Germans. So there is a street in Rechavia, Emile Zola, because Emile Zola wrote the article. Herzl was a newspaper writer who was sent to cover the case. And Herzl had this idea that the Jews are persecuted because they have no state. They're like wandering people. And they figure if you establish a state for the Jews, there won't be any more anti-Semitism. And just as a Monday morning quarterback, we could say that no, we see now in modern times that instead of being an anti-Semite, you're anti-Zionist, and it's really the same thing. Just you change the name. I'm not an anti-Semite, I'm a Zionist. So Herzl's idea didn't come true in that sense. But Herzl had an idea for a state. And he was ready to go to Uganda, he was ready to go to Argentina, and it didn't work out, it didn't catch on until he said, oh, let's go back to Israel. That caught on. So obviously, Rebbeinu Shalom wanted us to come back to Eretz Yisrael. There was no question that the time has come that we're coming back to Eretz Yisrael after 2,000 years. And it's interesting that in 2,000 years, people didn't talk about it that much. People came over the years, some Rishonim came, not many Rishonim, right? The Khazari came, the Bartanura came, but not very many Rishonim came. And people didn't come. It was very hard to come. And I always say, it was very interesting. When Ramban came, there was no meaning in Yerushalayim. And I always say it was interesting thing in the history that the Baal Shem Tov decided he wanted to come to Eretz Yisrael. Like, what made him want to come to Eretz Yisrael in the early 1800s? Why did he want to come to Eretz Yisrael? And he never made it, but many of his Talmidim, some Hasidim made it. And he started the first successful Ashkenazic yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. Was by the Baal Shem Tov's Talmidim. Happened there was a man about 100 years before that, Yehuda Chassid, who tried to establish an Ashkenazi community. Didn't work. But the Baal Shem Tov's community worked. And a few years later, the Vilna Gaon wanted to come. And he never made it, but his Talmidim came. So they joined the Hasidic community, which is interesting. In Europe, they were really not one place. But in Yerushalayim, they became the Yeshiva Yashim. And that's why, by the way, the Talmid of the Gra adopted the Hasidic dress, like shtreimels and long coats. They adopted the Hasidic dress because they were the first Ashkenazi community. So I always say, what happened? Why did it work? And I said, it reminds me in the Chumash, if you remember, before we went to Mitzrayim, Yaakov Avinu went to Mitzrayim, he sends Yehuda, Laharis Lefanov. Rashi brings different pshatim. Yehuda's Laharis Lefanov, and one of the pshatim he brings is Laharis means to establish a base medrash. So that means before we come there, it'll be a base medrash. So before the Zionist movement even started, the Yeshiva Yashin started, and great Talmidei Chacham, a very great Talmidei Chacham were here. And there was strong Torah in Eretz Yisrael before everything started. That's what Hashem wanted. But the movement started, and the Zionist movement really was a totally secular movement. And the truth is, there's a line that I never understood from the Brisker Rav, and it took me a while to understand what he meant. But I'll explain the line, and that'll really defines what's going on. He says they're not anti-religious because they're Zionists. They're Zionists because they're anti-religious. So I thought it was like an anti-Zionist statement, but it's really not. What the Brisker Rav meant, and the truth is, it happened in Europe a lot. In Europe, in the turn of the century, so in Germany, there was a movement of the Reform movement. We're gonna become more German, and our Jewishness will not inhibit us, right? And in Russia, there was no freedom. So instead of being a religious Jew, I'll be a literary Jew. There's a Shalom Aleichem and the Mendel Batasvarim, and I'll be a Jew in my literature, and we'll have Yiddish literature and Yiddish plays. So there's another thing that you can do. Instead of you want to be a Jew, I'll be a nationalistic Jew. I'll be a Jew because I'm a nationalistic Jew. It has nothing to do with religion. And that's really what the movement was. And the movement had really very little to do with Eretz Yisrael. And with Eretz Yisrael, except that it caught on. And it had nothing with Yiddishkeit. There was a famous man, Yitzchak Breuer, was one of the early thinkers of the Aguda movement. And I'll tell you what the Aguda is in a second. But his idea, he said about the Zionists, he says, they want a Jewish state, but it's really not a religious state at all. He says it's a state of Avodah Zarah, with a little room will leave for the Rebbeinu Shalom. There's a little room for the Rebbeinu Shalom. And the truth is that they couldn't define the definition of a Jewish state. It was very hard to define. Very different. What is a Jewish state? And it's still hard to define for them. What makes a Jewish state? And in this present government, there's no Shabbos, there's no kashrus, and there's no what makes a Jewish state. So the whole idea is a funny idea. So what exactly can we celebrate? So no one will disagree, maybe Satan, no one will disagree that we have to thank you, Rebbeinu Shalom, that we can live in Eretz Yisrael, and there's Eretz Yisrael for us to live in, and we can learn Torah. But whether the establishment of the state was a miracle for us in that sense, it wasn't such a miracle for us. We say, Baruch Hashem, we're back, and the Baruch Hashem wanted us back, and it happened in a way that we're not so happy with, but at least we're happy that we're here. What exactly happened on the 5th of Iyyar, which was May 14th, 1948, the UN already decided on November 29th, 1947, there should be a Palestinian division of Jews and Arabs, Jewish state and Arab state. And they delineated a very tiny Jewish state. There was a lot of celebration over here, and the Arabs went nuts. I'll tell you a good story, which is a very meaningful story, if you think about it for a second. On the Brisker Rav used to go for a walk every night. He went for a walk the night of November 29th, and people are dancing in the streets. Everybody's dancing. So they asked the Brisker Rav what he thought. So he said, I'll tell you what I think this is. It reminds me of a chasna. Go to a chasna, and the place is set up, and the band is there, and the food is there, and the chasna comes in with his new suit and his new tie, and the band is playing, and they're waiting for the kala to show up. And they're playing, and they're happy, and they're waiting for the kala to show up. The kala never shows up. The kala never shows up. The kala never shows up. You're going to have a meal, you're going to dance. And they says that's what they're doing. They're dancing without the kala, without the meal. That's how he described it. But it's something to think about. On the 5th of Iyyar, the British governor leaves. At the time he hits international waters, Ben-Gurion proclaims State of Israel. Okay? And another interesting thing to talk about, to mention about, they call it Haatzmaut, independence, the Declaration of Independence, the Israeli Declaration of Independence. If you know anything about the American Declaration of Independence, it starts by the grace of God. You know that, it starts by the grace of God. There was such a fight here, when they're going to put in the Haatzmaut, Hashem's name. It was a fight. It was a real fight. And most of the people didn't want Hashem's name in it. And they ended up with an interesting expression, Sur Yisrael. It's the rock of Israel. So we say every day, Sur Yisrael, right? The end of Shachris, we say Sur before the Shemona Esrei, Sur Yisrael. And we mean the rock of Israel is the Reddish Shalom. But they interpret the rock of Israel as the strength of Israel, the pride of Israel, not the rock, not Hashem. So that's what the problem with Zionism is. So what happened on the 5th of the year? He declared a state, and that day we were attacked on all the borders by a tremendous army. And no question about it. And, you could read the Shlomi's book about the wars, but I'm not going to go into that. But there's no question about the fact that we didn't lose that war totally is a tremendousness. Eretz Yisrael, in the state of Israel in 48 was a very small state. We would be right now in Jordan. You know that. Sanhedrin Machada would be in Jordan, right? Nebi Samuel would be in Jordan, right? Most of Ramat Eshkol was Jordan. Most of Yerushalayim was Jordan. It was a very, very small state. Kevin was Jordan, right? Kever Rachel was Jordan, right? The Golan was Syria. So we had a very, very small state. It was bigger than the UN dividing lines, but it was a very small state. But it was an S. And they asked the Brisker of, the best thing about the fifth of the year was there's a tremendous war, and we survived the war. But whether we should celebrate that or not, that's a very good question. Whether it's room for celebration in a religious way. They in fact, they asked the Brisker of, and it's another part. I'll tell you two other things about this, and then we'll continue something else. Two other things. They asked the Brisker of after the War of Independence. We know you don't believe like Sadman that the Sultan wins the wars. That's very difficult to understand that. We don't believe, you don't believe like Mizrahi that it's the beginning of the final Geula. So why did they win the war? So Brisker says, because now the Jews are in Eretz Yisrael, and the Makam HaTorah for Klal Yisrael today is Eretz Yisrael. There's Makam HaTorah. And we see that's what happened. And the Hashem is protecting the Torah. The truth is, I think what the Brisker says a lot. There's a Chazal tell us, an interesting Chazal. There's a Sidin, it's destined that Kol HaBatim Midrash, Kol HaBatim Knesses, that all the shuls and all the Batim Midrash and Chutzlards will be in Eretz Yisrael. And the place you shot in the Medrash, it's a Gemara really, is that they'll fly over when it's time. But I understood it a whole different way many years ago. I was here, Bells, you know where Bells is, right? When Bells started to build their building, they put an ad in the paper. They showed a picture of Bells back in Bells, which is the building looked the same on the outside. Even though the Bells building today is 100 times or 1,000 times bigger than the Bells building was in Bells. But the same style of building. And they wrote this Chazal. On the picture we're building. And I realized that the Chazal could have meant that exactly that there was Bells and Bells, now was Bells in Yerushalayim. And there was Ger and Ger, and now was Ger in Yerushalayim. And there was Panovich and Panovich and Panovich in Yerushalayim. And the Lakewood was Lakewood, there's Lakewood over here in Ramot. And Chavetz Chaim was in Yerushalayim, but there's the Chavetz Chaim here. So all the yeshivas of Chutzlars are coming to Eretz Yisrael, and the yeshiva, everything's coming. It's true, and it doesn't mean miraculous that way. Miraculous in a different way. And one other thing I want to just add is, in other words, to thank Hashem that we're here, we don't have to thank Hashem we're here. Are we happy that we're here, or are we happy they're here? Are we happy to story here, or are we happy to story here? Is the fact that there's a state so important? Whatever Hashem wanted, that's how it is. It worked like the state, so we could be here. If it wouldn't have been for a state, Hashem would have found another way for us to be here. In other words, Hashem has no shortage of ways to get us here. That's the way it happened. I've mentioned many times, we weren't zochah for a better way. So that's what happened this way. But we have to thank Hashem that we're here. And the question whether we have to thank or to celebrate a year as a holiday or not a holiday, it's not pushing at all. And most of the posting that we asked Shilas to, or Moshe Feinstein, right? We're back, or the Steitler, we spoke with Chaim Kanievsky, this Rav Shach, all of our Shivas in Panovich, right? And I was saying there's no Halloween on Haatzmaut, right? The Panovich wrote and they still fly a flag in Panovich, and they asked Panovich why he does that. So he says, I do it because I want to market them to give us money. Well, I think it's a karsatov. And Ben Gurion asked, I think it was Ben Gurion who asked the Panovich Rabbi, he says, no, it wasn't Ben Gurion, somebody else asked, it wasn't Ben Gurion. Yeah, somebody else, the Panovich Rabbi, he says, how long you He says that, I said, I do like Ben Gurion, I don't say halal, like Ben Gurion. Okay, Ben Gurion I'm sure didn't say halal either, okay. So that's, you should realize that we're happy that we're here, and we give credit that we're here, and we don't have to, and that's where it begins and ends, and we thank Hashem for that. There was an interesting book a few years ago that a secular Jew wrote against Rav Kook, and he called it Chamar Shal Mashiach. And really, Rav Kook had a very interesting hashkafa. It's probably the real Torah hashkafa. And Rav Kook was very, very, believed very much in the settlement of Eretz Yisrael. Whether he believed in the state or not believed in the state, it's hard to know because he died 30 years or 40 years before the state was established. So it's hard to know what he held. But he believed in the settlement. And they asked him, so why was it done this way? So he said, because we weren't going to do it. We weren't going to do it. So Hashem says, these guys have no schus, these non-religious have no schus. They all have a schus of building Eretz Yisrael for us. So the book of Chamar Shel Mashiach was about that we wanted the non-religious Jews to be the Chamor, to be the donkey of Mashiach, because we're not that. So you realize that, one other thought I just thought of, it's a very important idea also. Another important idea that I heard from Simple Wasserman Zatzal. Simple Wasserman was the son of Rabbi Granofsky, who was killed by the Nazis. Rabbi Simple Wasserman spoke in Yeshiva David several times, and he said that it's just an interesting thing. Most of the Western Aliyah, from Western countries, not from Russia, because Russia is a different thing, but from Western Aliyah is religious Jews, like 87%, 89% religious Jews. And most of the people leave Eretz Yisrael are not religious. So what's happening? So Simcha says, "V'hikas aretz." The Eretz Yisrael throws out those people. They don't believe in anything. So they're being thrown out. They're being thrown out, and we're getting Eretz Yisrael. And that's what's happening. And the truth is, the secular Jews are very afraid of what's happening. That we're producing en masse, and they're not reproducing. Baruch Hashem, we're here. Baruch Hashem, we can learn Torah here. Baruch Hashem, there is Torah here, and we thank Hashem for that. And whether here is a holiday or not a holiday, that's a different question. So I want to just finish. We're in the middle of Sfira. So there's a very nice Sefer Chinuch. This happens to be the Minchas Chinuch, which is a different Sefer. It's Kedai Little Minchas Chinuch. But the Sefer Chinuch was based on the Sefer Chinuch. Sefer Chinuch was written by Rishon. We're not sure who was written. At the time of the Rashba, the Rabbi, written for around that time. So he goes through the 613 mitzvahs, and he gives explanations for the mitzvahs. I'm going to read you his explanation to have an idea what we're doing. And I'll read just two parts. So defines the mitzvah, and then what he calls the shrush in the mitzvah, the roots of the mitzvah, the reasons. Mitzvahs Yisrael Omer. He says, Lis bar tishuv v'arbem yom. There's a mitzvah say to count 49 days. Miyom havas Omer. They bring this korban Omer. Shu yom shisha aser b'Nisan. The first Omer is the 16th day of Nisan. Shenemar v'sfartem lochem nimachas and Shabbos. You count for you the day after Shabbos. Shabbos means over here. Yom avisam es Omer to right? To count every single day and the Shavuos. He says, Mishrosh mitzvah. What's the root? What's the reason for mitzvah? Outside of pshat. Pshat. Listen, it's very important. The fish Ichron Shel Yisrael. The Ichron of the Jewish people. It's not Eretz Yisrael. It's Eretz Yisrael important, but not the Ichron. Eina El Torah. What makes us Jewish? What makes us Jewish is the Torah. B'nei Torah Nivru Shemayim V'aretz. Because of the Torah, it was a creation of the heavens and the earth. And it says in the pasuk, "Im lo brisi yom v'layla." It wouldn't be for my covenant, the covenant of the Torah. There would be no shmeiretz. U'ikr v'asibo shenigo. It's the main, the ikr, the main thing, and the reason that we were redeemed from Mitzrayim. K'dei she'kabel Torah b'sina v'kamul. We should accept the Torah and do it, as the Torah, as Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu. Zelachol ha'oz ki ani l'shlachti b'hotzicha. You'll take the people out of the Mitzrayim. And you'll serve Hashem in this mountain. What does the pasuk mean? Take you out of Mitzrayim. That's the sign. To serve Hashem in this mountain. Which means you'll accept the Torah. Is the main thing. That's the only reason we were redeemed. And that's the ultimate purpose that they have. And it's the biggest thing they have. It's more important than being freed from Avdus. Hashem makes the Moshe, this is the sign. Say some Avdus like about the Torah. Go from servitude to accept the Torah. The Tafel is the servitude, Nikr is the Torah. B'nei came, because of this, Kol Ikun Shel Yisrael, Ugavoda Nigolu, V'olu L'chol Agidul Shalom. Because of this, the main thing, the main Iker, the Iker of Klal Yisrael, and because we redeemed, is to get to this great point. So we're commanded to count for the day after Pesach, Ad Yom Nesilas Torah, till the day of accepting the Torah. Laharos is this, to show b'nafshenu, to show in our hearts and our souls, how much desire, great desire for this holy and honorable day in our hearts. Like somebody working in an evet, like a slave, wants a little bit of shade. And we say, when is this time coming already? That we're looking forward to. She got to the Chayrus. We went out for Chayrus, but we can't wait to get to this day. When you count things, when you count something, how much more time, right? I was speaking to my friend Yo last night. It's 3 weeks to his wedding. He's excited it's 3 weeks to his wedding. And we're excited that it's 5 weeks to Kabbalah Torah. Why do we count the say so many days pass from the counting? We don't say how many days till we get there. He calls them Marabonu, Harotzun Achazok. How we're counting we want the days to pass to show we're going to get there. You don't want to talk about all the it's 49 days, that's too long. We don't want to talk about it. It sounds like it's too long. Right? So we want to count the days when we pass these days, Okay, there's the other question, but that's what it's all about. Okay? So what the Chinuch is telling us is that we're excited and to get to this day. And I tell you many times, and it's for sure true, that the celebration of Shavuos, of course, is Zman Matan Torah Seina. But it's interesting Lashon. I saw somebody says, it's not Zman Shenotan Torah Seina, Matan. It's giving. Matan. He's giving. Because every year it's a renewal. Every year we have the option of accepting the Torah again, and every way that we can get to that level of I'm renewing my commitment, I'm accepting the Torah. Now, on this Shavuos, in 2.5 weeks from now, we'll accept the Torah again. It's a re-acceptance of the Torah. And that's what we're going to be doing, Mitzvah Hashem. So we should think that when we count the Sefirah, we should be thinking about what's going to happen, how important it is to us. Part of our problem, Rabbi Granofsky will say, if you would ask a kid to say, was a good guy the Torah, I'd rather be a guy. Okay? But most of us hopefully don't say that. We make a bracha every morning, Shalom Asani Goy. And the reason that we're not a guy, the whole reason, and Baruch Hashem we have Eretz Yisrael, and Baruch Hashem we can live here. But the reason we're not a guy is only because of Shavuos. That's why we're not a guy. The fact that, right, Goyim have their lands, Goyim have their places to live, right? But we the land is a mitzvah, but our connection is the Torah. And the truth is, when Ben Gurion went to speak in the UN after the establishment of the state, he took a Tanakh with him. He took a Tanakh. He says, look, we have a Tanakh. And the people asked when they came back, how come that part of the Tanakh you believe, the rest of the Tanakh you don't believe? Okay, we're not, but that's, our connection there to Israel is the Torah. And that's what we're counting now. We're counting the days. We can't wait until this holy day comes. We try our best. So we spoke about that we're happy and we thank the Rebbeinu Shalom all the time. I'm happy I'm able to be here learning Torah. I'm happy to get the opportunity. I'm happy there's so much Torah in Eretz Yisrael. No, it's an unbelievable thing. I always say, if you would have told your great grandparents that you're going to spend a year in Eretz Yisrael learning Torah, they would think you're nuts. And Baruch Hashem, if you tell your grandparents that, it's for sure not. Everybody does it. Why not? But 3 generations ago, nobody would have thought of such a thing. So our hearts should be full of thanks to everybody, Shalom, for the opportunity that we learn Torah here, and full of thanks that we can be here. But we should use let's not forsake the opportunity. Let's realize why we're here. We're not here tomorrow. If you go down to certain places, you can dance in the middle of the street with a flag. That's not why we're here. We didn't come to dance in the middle of the street with a flag. To us, a flag is no more meaning than a flag, right? Our flag is the Torah. Our flag is a connection to Rebbeinu Shalom. Our flag is tefillah and Torah, right? And that's what we want to connect to. And the fact that people want to celebrate, let them celebrate, okay? And I said, if it's July 4th, it's July 4th. They can definitely celebrate July 4th. But to say that it's a Purim Hanukkah, not so much to say it's a Purim Hanukkah. Baruch Hashem, I just mentioned one other thing, and I'll close. That it's interesting. We have Purim Hanukkah, which were later. Later, I'm talking they were made later. I guarantee nobody here, no one person here, including me, can name the day we first entered Israel under Yeshua. Right? You know the day? Nobody can name the day.
Was the Pesach?
It was Pesach time. Yeah, what day was exactly? And no one here can mention which day Shlomo Melech finished Beis Mikdash. And no one here can mention which day Ezra Sofer and the family came back to Israel. So sometimes in history, certain days are not significant, right? Chazal were able to set up what's more significant, what's not significant. The fact that we were happy to be in Eretz Yisrael, we love Eretz Yisrael, and we gave an opportunity to learn Torah in Eretz Yisrael, there's nothing better than that. Whether today or not today is important or not important in our calendar, it's not so relevant to us. And what's relevant to us is to be thankful to the Rabbi Shalom that we can be here and we learn here. And of course, think about whether we're doing what we're supposed to be doing in that aspect. Am I really learning the way I'm supposed to be learning? Am I really connecting to the Rabbi Shalom the way I'm supposed to be connecting? I'm an Eretz Yisrael, and there's more of an achrayus. And I'll just leave you with another thought that if you're not doing it so well, the one thing, if you're back in America, you're not doing it so well, you're back in America. But now we're in the king's palace, and the king is watching us from his palace. And we're not outside the palace. So we're in the palace, we have to be much more careful than not in the palace. And we're in the palace. We should all be chazing ourselves in that.